All his life, Luke Callahan never thought he'd belong anywhere. But in just one night, the drifter who had nothing became the blood brother of an entire Apache tribe. It all began with a reckless choice. When he stumbled upon a dying Apache woman, Luke ignored the unwritten law of the frontier, the law that said never get involved with Indian affairs. He lifted her onto his only horse and let go, watching his one lifeline vanish into enemy territory. The next morning, 70 Apache warriors appeared. They hadn't come to kill him. They had come to test him. From the sacred stone circle, from the white feathers they carried, from the ancient law of the gift of the horse, a covenant that bound any man who gave up his horse to save a life, Luke was drawn into a ritual he never knew existed. And as the sun set, he would be forced to face a trial of life and death, where only the truth of his heart could decide his fate. The first light of dawn spread across the Badlands, painting the red rocks, withered grass, and endless horizon in shades of gold. The high plains wind carried the last chill of night, whistling through jagged stone, howling like voices from another world. Luke Callahan stirred awake, muscles heavy with exhaustion. His calloused hand reached for the worn cowboy hat lying beside him. He pulled it low to shield his eyes from the rising sun, still half blinded by its harsh glare. He was used to waking in solitude, but today, the moment his eyes adjusted to the light, his heart slammed hard in his chest. On the ridge before him stood 70 Apache warriors, mounted high on their horses, lined in perfect formation like statues carved from the mountain itself. They did not shout. They did not raise weapons. The air carried no war cries, no drum beats, only silence. Each warrior held a single white feather, its tip catching the sunlight, trembling in the wind. The feathers shimmered like ghostly flames, filling the scene with an eerie, otherworldly weight. Luke froze. His hand instinctively reached for a revolver that was no longer there. He had lost it long ago. He'd faced outlaws, hired guns, even packs of hungry wolves across the frontier, but never had he seen anything like this. The silence was worse than gunfire. Why weren't they attacking? Why weren't arrows flying? Why did every one of those dark eyes fix solely on him? Not with hatred, not even with rage, but with expectation. His throat tightened, raw and dry as desert dust. Sweat prickled cold down his back, though the morning air was crisp. He could feel it. Every gust of wind, every shift of sunlight stopped around him, holding him captive in that fragile stillness. One wrong move and it could all ignite. Luke glanced around. There was nowhere to run, just red earth stretching for miles, dotted with dead cactus and the faint track of his own worn boots. The Apache's horses snorted, breath fogging in the morning air, but their riders remained perfectly still. It felt less like a standoff, more like he had stumbled into a ritual, a law older than the land itself. Memories of yesterday came back sharp. He remembered her eyes. The Apache woman collapsed near the dry creek bed. Pride and pain mingled in her gaze. He remembered hoisting her onto his only horse. He remembered the moment he let go, watched the animal trot away into the shadows of her people. At the time, it had felt like instinct, like conscience. Now, under 70 unblinking eyes, he realized it was more. It had set something in motion. Luke clenched his hat brim, fighting the tremor in his hands. The silence pressed harder, broken only by the faint clink of silver ornaments swaying from Apache saddles. Then movement. One warrior in the front leaned slightly, and Luke's breath caught. Hanging from the man's belt, tied with a strip of rawhide, was a lock of hair. Brown hair, sun-lightened at the tips, the exact shade of Luke's own. His stomach dropped. His hand shot to his head, where a few strands had fallen loose during long, weary nights. But how? How could a piece of his hair be dangling from the waist of an Apache warrior? Fear coiled inside him like a rattler ready to strike. They had been watching him, marking him, studying every trace he left behind. His very identity, his smallest pieces, were already in their possession. The wind shifted cold, cutting through his shirt. Sweat burned his eyes. He squinted, searching for meaning in their silence. But their eyes didn't waver. They looked right through him. And in that moment, Luke understood something terrible. Silence was deadlier than gunfire. Gunfire ended things quickly. Silence stretched on, carving out an abyss with no bottom. He stepped forward once. Gravel crunched beneath his boot, a sound so sharp it echoed like thunder. Still, none of the warriors moved. 70 men remained frozen, feathers gleaming white as blades in the sun. His pulse roared in his ears. He scanned their faces. No rage, no joy, no hint of attack, just patience. A patience that told him they weren't here to kill him outright. They were waiting for him. And Luke Callahan realized with a jolt that he'd been drawn into a game where everyone else knew the rules. Except him. The memory of yesterday seared back. The Apache woman's dark eyes, like his sister Mary's before she died. He couldn't save Mary. He hadn't been able to bear turning his back on the woman at the creek. That's why he'd given her the horse. And now, because of that choice, he stood alone before 70 silent judges. The sun climbed higher, casting a halo of fire around the warriors. The feathers in their hands flared like shards of lightning. And below them, Luke Callahan felt the ground shift beneath his boots, as if fate itself had chosen this morning to hand down its verdict. One look at that lock of hair swaying on the warrior's belt, and Luke knew his life would never again be his own. He swallowed hard. They hadn't come to kill him. They'd come to judge him, and there was no turning back. The sun of the previous afternoon spilled across the red cliffs, stretching pale streaks of light on across the cracked earth. Luke Callahan had only meant to cut through the canyon on his way back to an old camp. His faithful horse carried a frayed saddle and a nearly empty canteen, and his heart carried nothing but exhaustion after days of wandering. The prairie promised nothing but dust and danger. Yet in that harsh landscape, fate stopped him cold. The sound came faint at first. A low moan, almost like wind sighing through stone, yet sharp enough to catch Luke's ear. He pulled the reins tight, tilting his head. There it was again. A weak, weary groan carried by the howling breeze. His chest clenched. He knew that sound. The sound of dying. He had heard it once before in a wooden shack long ago, when Mary, his sister, fought for her last breaths. Luke urged the horse forward into the canyon, hoofbeats echoing like a mournful drum. And then he saw her. A woman, Apache, frail and collapsed against a withered cactus. Blood soaked her buckskin dress, pooling dark around her thigh. A ragged bandage, clumsily tied, barely held the wound. Her skin burned with fever, her breath broken and shallow. But it was her eyes that froze Luke in place. Dark, deep, unwavering, not pleading, not surrendering. There was defiance there, a painful strength, as though she had already accepted fate, yet still guarded a seed of hope. The sight ripped through Luke's heart, because he had seen it before. In Mary's eyes, in the final moments when she hadn't begged for help, only looked at him with quiet resolve, telling him without words, "Live on for me." Luke trembled. He knew the danger. This was Apache land, a white drifter kneeling beside a dying Apache woman. If anyone found him here, the sentence would be death. His mind screamed to ride away, but his heart roared louder. He couldn't turn his back again. He dropped to his knees, his rough palm brushing the heat of her skin. She moaned, lips moving in Apache words he didn't understand, but her voice still carried pride. That fragile breath was enough to bind him. He inhaled deep, like a man diving off a cliff, and slid his arms beneath her. She weighed so little, yet her body bore the crushing weight of his responsibility. He hoisted her onto the saddle. Clumsy, hurried, the motion made the wound bleed fresh, bright red soaking through the torn bandage. But she did not scream. She bit down, eyes squeezing shut, breathing in jagged bursts. Luke tied her to the saddle with rope so she wouldn't fall when unconsciousness claimed her. Standing at his horse's side, Luke looked up at her face under the fading light. Pale, fevered, but still hard with grit. A strange ache surged in him, as though he was staring at Mary again. He whispered a vow under his breath. This time, I won't walk away. And so he led the horse on foot. Rocks tore at his boots, cutting through the leather, but he pressed forward. Hour after hour, 6 straight, he dragged his blistered feet across the broken land, pulling Nayeli, as he would later learn her name, through ravines and over ridges, until night swallowed the canyon. Thirst clawed his throat. Pain stabbed his legs. Still, he didn't stop. At times, she mumbled through delirium. Luke caught none of the words, but the rhythm felt like whispers from the spirit world, echoing through the wide prairie. To him, it was Mary's voice granting him one more chance to make things right. When the sky turned indigo and stars scattered above the peaks, Luke saw them, the 3 red stones standing in a row, a boundary marker. Beyond it, faint firelight from Apache lodges. He knew what it meant. Cross that line, and his life would hang by a thread. He untied her, steadying her as she stumbled forward, legs trembling. He should have kept the horse, his last means of survival. But as he watched her limp toward the lights, something inside him broke free. He slapped the horse's flank hard. The animal neighed and bolted after her, disappearing into the night. Luke stood frozen, palms still warm from that final touch. His only possession, his lifeline, gone. A reckless act, thoughtless, raw. Yet in his chest, a flicker of peace. He had lost everything, but perhaps gained back a fragment of himself. That night haunted him. After the horse vanished into the Apache village, Luke stood motionless, staring until its shadow faded. A cowboy without a horse was a soldier stripped of his gun. And yet he had done it, without hesitation. When dawn broke, Luke had walked 18 blistering miles, his boots shredded, feet bleeding, stomach hollow, throat cracked dry. The prairie wind cut like knives, but he staggered on. Because stopping meant dying. And then he saw them. On the ridge ahead, 70 Apache warriors stood tall in the glow of morning, mounted, silent, feathers gleaming white in their hands, a living wall blocking his only path. Luke's breath caught. For a heartbeat, he thought it was a mirage from thirst, a trick of exhaustion. But then one of them moved, a rider urging his horse forward. Sunlight lit his weathered face, his eyes sharp and ancient. The chief. Luke's knees nearly buckled. He wanted to step back, but the earth pinned him in place. The chief halted 10 paces away. His hand slid deliberately into a pouch. Every motion steady, slow, suffocating the air between them. Luke braced, expecting a blade, the snap of a bowstring. Instead, the chief pulled out something far worse. A rein. Not just any rein. His rein. The very one Luke had stitched countless times, worn smooth by his horse's teeth. There was no mistaking it. But now it bore something new. Symbols scrawled in dried blood. The lines formed crude circles, slashes, arrows, marks Luke had never seen. Yet he knew one thing. Apaches never marked without meaning. Blood turned it sacred. Luke's chest heaved. His body shook. Words stuck dry in his throat. The chief raised the rein high. Sunlight struck the stiffened blood, painting the symbols dark and heavy. His eyes pierced Luke's soul, not with anger, not with hate, but with expectation. Luke shuddered. They wanted him to understand something he couldn't yet see. His reckless act had been transformed into covenant, written in blood, bound in ritual. His breath quickened. He remembered the moment he let go of the horse. Too fast, too desperate. But in it, Mary's memory had burned bright, urging him, "Some things are worth the sacrifice, Luke. Don't turn away." Now the reign itself declared it. His freedom was gone. His choice had become a sentence. Dust swirled in the wind as the chief tied the rein back to his belt, eyes never leaving Luke's. On the ridge above, 70 feathers swayed like ghostly witnesses. Luke understood then. He had stepped into a circle with no way out. Yesterday's reckless act had bound him to an ancient law he had never heard of, and now it stared him down in blood-stained leather. Sweat stung his lips. His throat burned with thirst. Yet the only thing heavier than his body's weakness was the weight of those eyes upon him. The chief was waiting. They were all waiting. The air around Luke Callahan tightened like an invisible noose. On the ridge above, 70 Apache warriors stood motionless, white feathers in hand, their eyes cutting into him like silent blades. But unlike the blunt threat of border raiders, this silence carried something heavier, deeper, a sense of expectation. The elder chief descended first. He did not hurry. Every step was measured, solemn, as though the earth itself made way for him. His long black hair, streaked with silver, fell in a braid across his chest. His weathered face bore the harsh lines of sun and battle. Across his chest hung a necklace of white bird bones, swaying with each breath. His eyes fixed on Luke, not with anger, not with hate, but with the authority of a man who carried truths others could never fully grasp. The chief stopped a few paces away and raised his hand. Instantly, silence deepened into ritual. The warriors bowed their heads slightly, as though this very moment was sacred. Luke swallowed hard, sweat slicking his palms. He didn't know what he was witnessing. He only knew that this old man held his life in his hands. Then the chief spoke. His voice was low and ancient, like stones rolling deep inside a mountain. He spoke in Apache, each word slow, deliberate. A younger warrior stepped forward, nodding as he translated into rough but clear English. "The white man has broken the law of the horse gift." Luke's brow furrowed. The law of the horse gift? He had never heard of such a thing. All he knew of the Apache came from barroom tales. They were fierce, loyal, and they never forgot a grudge. But this law? It was foreign to him. The elder held a white feather like an oath. "Among our people, when a warrior gives away his only horse, it is no kindness. It is a sacred bond. A horse is his soul, his freedom, his honor. To give it is to give his life. From that moment, he belongs not to himself, but to the one he saved, and to that one's people." The translator's voice shook as he repeated the words. Luke's chest hammered. I didn't know. I only wanted to help her." Some warriors chuckled softly, but the elder's gaze cut sharp. "Not knowing does not free you." Luke's knees weakened. He saw again his horse vanish into the night with Nayeli. To him, reckless mercy. To them, a binding vow. On the ridge, 70 warriors raised white feathers, the morning light turning them to fire. It was no threat. It was judgment. The elder pointed at Luke. From this day, you are bound. If your act was truth, you are our brother. If born of deceit, you have committed sacrilege. Luke gasped. He wanted to protest, but Apache eyes waited only for submission. Mary's face rose in his mind, whispering in memory. You've chosen this road. No turning back. Then the elder's voice struck again. The choosing will be held at sunset. The phrase chilled him. By the way feathers lifted higher, he knew it was no ordinary rite. At sunset, his fate would be decided, brotherhood or death in shame. Sweat prickled down his spine. How could mercy turn into shackles? How could he prove his heart to a people he barely knew? And then movement. A woman stepped forward, face lined with hardship, eyes solemn. Across her shoulders rested something that froze Luke's blood. A shawl. A faded blue woolen shawl, frayed, trimmed with silver thread. His mother's shawl. He remembered it vividly, her wrapping it around his boyhood neck, later passing it to Mary before fever claimed her. After Mary's death, it had vanished with their home. And now, here it was. The woman lifted it high. Silver threads caught the sun, the woven pattern searing into Luke's sight. His knees nearly gave. How had it reached these hands? Murmurs rippled through the gathered. She spoke, voice deep and solemn. The elder chief listened, then nodded. She says this shawl was not hers. It was passed down from the days of war. It was once a gift, from a white woman to a wounded Apache warrior in a winter of blood. Luke's chest collapsed inward. He remembered whispers, his mother vanishing for days, returning with a wound. Could the rumors be true? His trembling hand touched the fabric. His vision blurred. The elder's voice carried like thunder. White man, you did not come as a stranger. Your act continues a thread begun long ago, woven by your mother's hands. The choosing is no accident. It is destiny. Luke reeled. He had not only saved Nayeli, he had stepped into a circle drawn long before, by blood, by oath, by fate itself. Evening light slipped from the prairie, streaking the red cliffs with fading gold. In the valley, a ring of stones formed a spiral, sacred and menacing. Luke Callahan was led into its center, ropes burning his wrists, flanked by 2 Apache warriors. With each step, a drumbeat echoed, slow, deliberate, like the heart of some great beast. Forced to his knees, he faced silence. Dozens of eyes fixed on him. 5 elders took their seats on great stones. 2 silver-haired men, 2 weathered women, and the chief, cold, immovable. One by one they smeared black ash across their foreheads. Smoke from burning sage coiled upward, dizzying, sharpening Luke's senses. At last, the chief spoke, his voice deep as thunder, the interpreter translating. You, Luke Callahan, gave your only horse to save Nayeli. But our law weighs not the act alone. Was it purity or deceit? If false, you pay with blood. The second elder, a woman with piercing eyes, leaned forward. Do you seek reward from saving her? Luke's throat burned. No, I expected nothing. Leaving her to die would have been worse. Whispers stirred, then fell. Her gaze softened by a fraction. The scarred old man, third elder, hissed. Do you think yourself good? Do you seek praise? The question pierced him. He saw Mary's fevered hands, nights of solitude, the guilt of survival. His voice cracked. I don't know if I'm good. Maybe I'm not. But if I'd left her, I could never forgive myself. The words dropped like stone. Silence deepened. The fourth elder, ancient and wrinkled, studied him, then gave a slow nod. The chief's gaze swept the crowd, then settled on Luke. You do not know if you are good, but you know leaving one to die is sin. That is truth. The interpreter's words fell, and the hush that followed was not rejection. It was acceptance. Luke bowed his head, his chest tight. He had spoken no plea, only truth, and somehow that had been enough. But then the chief's voice rose again. There is another trial. The sacrifice. The interpreter's words struck like falling stones. You must choose one of 5 volunteers to take your place. Luke's head snapped up. The drum resumed, grim and slow, as 5 figures stepped into the firelight. The first, a youth with eager eyes. The second, a hardened woman, hands calloused. The third, an old warrior, scarred but unbroken. The fourth, a man Luke's age, his family trembling in the shadows. And the last, Luke's breath caught. Nayeli, limping, leaning on a staff, but resolute. Her dark eyes locked on his. The interpreter's voice faltered. She says, a life debt must be paid. You saved her. She will bear your burden. Agony tore through him. He had saved her to live, not to die in his stead. Yet the circle murmured, warriors nodding. Justice, they called it. Others simply waited, judging his choice. Luke shut his eyes. Mary's face rose before him. His sister, whom he had failed. Her final smile forgiving even in death. If he chose Nayeli now, he would repeat the same sin, letting a woman fall while he still drew breath. The drums quickened, urging. The chief raised his hand, voice booming. Choose Luke Callahan. One will face the danger for you. Refuse, and the law will decide. Luke's eyes swept the line. The boy with life unspent, the weathered woman, the old warrior scarred by too many battles, the father with family clinging in the dark, and Nayeli, who had already vowed herself. Sweat streamed down his temple. His whole body trembled like a drawn bowstring. He knew any choice would damn him in his own heart. Silently, he cried out, Lord, what am I supposed to do? The stone circle blazed with fire. Torches leaned in the wind, shadows stretching long across the earth so the Apache seemed like restless spirits gathered in judgment. Above, 70 warriors raised their white feathers, quills trembling in the glow. Luke Callahan knelt at the center, wrists raw from ropes, throat dry, heart hammering. Before him stood 5 volunteers, each with a face, a life. Among them, most striking of all, was Nayeli. The woman he had carried back from death now stared with fierce, unyielding eyes. A life for a life. The old chief raised his hand. Drums thundered. The interpreter's voice cracked. Choose Luke Callahan. One will bear your fate. Refuse, and you face it alone. Every gaze bore down. The boy, still green, courage burning in his eyes. The middle-aged woman, gray streaking her hair, hands trembling but proud. The scarred veteran, back straight as a spear. The man his own age, family trembling behind him. And finally, Nayeli, ready to die for him. Luke's chest tightened. He closed his eyes. From memory came Mary's voice, his sister's voice, steady as ever. There are moments when you must choose what's right, even if it costs everything. He opened his eyes, breath steady. No, he said hoarsely, but clear. I will choose no one. Not a single one of them will suffer in my place. Gasps rippled. Warriors scowled, others stared. The chief lifted his hand, waiting. Luke rose to his knees, voice burning like fire. I gave the horse. I broke a law I never knew. Then I will bear it. If there are 5 trials, I'll take them all. Alone. The words struck like thunder. Women covered their mouths. Warriors glanced at one another, feathers trembling like storm winds. Nayeli stepped forward, pain in her eyes. You will die, she whispered. Luke turned, voice blazing. If death is the price, so be it. Better I die than any of you. Silence swallowed the valley. The elder chief studied him long, then spoke with the weight of ages. The interpreter's voice shook. Never, in all our history, has a stranger spoken such words. To take all burdens upon himself, this is the path of honor. 70 feathers lifted skyward. A cry rose from the warriors. Not war, but recognition. The circle broke. Some wept. Nayeli covered her mouth, tears streaming. Luke knelt, exhausted, but inside burned a new fire. If death came, it would come clothed in honor, a gift he had never dreamed of. The chief's voice rose again. He need face no trial, the interpreter translated, for in his vow he has already proved his heart. To us, he has passed. The village exhaled. Women sobbed. Warriors nodded. White feathers gleamed in the fading sun. Luke swayed, stunned. He had thought he'd spoken his death, yet they looked at him now as a brother. The elder strode forward, heavy as a drumbeat. He laid both hands on Luke's shoulders and thundered words that needed no translation. The interpreter forced them through pale lips. You have fulfilled the debt of 2 generations. Luke's breath caught. My mother? The elder nodded. Years ago, when war swept the border, a white woman risked all to save one of ours. That woman was your mother. The shawl you saw today was her gift, her mark of mercy, the words cut like a blade. Luke staggered. He remembered childhood fragments, his mother returning from war, arm-bound, neighbors whispering. He had been too young to know. Now the truth lay bare. She had saved an Apache, and her son had walked the same road. The circle murmured. Elders nodded. This was no accident but destiny, stitched with courage and blood. Luke bowed his head, tears searing his cheeks. He had thought of his mother as fragile, a woman worn thin by a hard land. But she had done something great. And now, he had carried it forward. The elder's grip tightened. You are no outsider. From this day, your blood flows with ours, your spirit bound with ours. And then, the entire circle dropped to their knees, laying white feathers before him, a sea of white surrendering in recognition. Nayeli stepped forward, voice trembling. You did not just save me. You paid the debt of your whole family. Luke stood frozen. Fear was gone, replaced with the heavier weight of honor and destiny. As the last light bled into a sky of stars, the name Luke Callahan no longer belonged to a lost drifter. It belonged to a man carrying the honor of 2 generations, a bridge between 2 worlds. Night fell across the prairie like a heavy black blanket. Fires flickered around the stone circle, painting the Apache people in sacred light. A deep chant rose, ancient as the land itself, binding earth to sky. Luke Callahan stood at the center, his hands still trembling from the elder's grip on his shoulder. Yesterday, he had been a ragged drifter ready to die of thirst. Now he stood not as an enemy, but at the very heart of a tribe once feared by every settler. A horn bellowed. 70 warriors entered the circle, torches blazing. Each carried a white feather, their sacred oath. Step by step, they advanced, then knelt, laying them at his feet. A silver carpet shimmered in the wind. Then came gifts, a carved knife, a necklace strung with prayer, a wool blanket woven with ancient patterns. These were not possessions, but pieces of spirit, offerings of honor from entire families. Luke's chest tightened as the pile grew. Out on the frontier, he'd been a nobody. But here, 70 Apache warriors gave him their most sacred treasures. The chanting swelled. Women and children joined, their voices echoing off canyon walls. Drums thundered in time with Luke's racing heart, until it seemed the world itself turned with this moment. Then a figure led a horse into the circle. Luke's breath caught. It was his horse, the one he had given up the day before. But now its coat shone, mane braided with red cloth, reins lined with white feathers glowing like starlight. A new saddle bore carvings of suns and spirals, Apache marks of honor. Luke laid a trembling hand on its neck. The horse pressed against his shoulder as if there had never been distance. Yet now, it carried the bond of an entire people. The elder chief raised his hand. The chants hushed. His voice rang out, thunder strong. From this day, Luke Callahan is no longer a stranger. He has proved his heart. He was ready to die for another. The sacred law is fulfilled. He is our brother, a white brother. The interpreter's voice broke. You are named a white brother. An honor given only a few times in our history. A roar erupted. Warriors shouted in unison, feathers lifted high, a sea of light beneath the black sky. Luke froze. For years he had been only a survivor, abandoned after his family's death. Now, in the heart of an Apache village, he had found what he'd always longed for. A home, a people, an honor to live and die for. His eyes found Nayeli. She stood among the crowd, dark eyes shining with tears, her smile not of debt, but of kinship. Luke drew a deep breath, filling his chest with sage smoke, earth, leather, and fire. For the first time, he knew his steps would never again be alone. When the crowd dispersed, fires burned low, leaving red coals like a field of hearts. Only Luke, Nayeli, and the horse remained at the village edge. She leaned on her cane, her gaze steady. You have changed your fate, Luke, she said softly. You came as a wanderer, but you leave as a brother. Luke lowered his head, fingers tightening on the reins. The horse nudged him, as if feeling the weight of the moment. His voice broke. Never did I think I'd be called brother. Out on the border, I was nothing. But now, he looked toward the lodges, where 70 warriors lay beside their families. I carry the oath of an entire tribe. From her pouch, Nayeli drew a single white feather, rimmed with red clay. She pressed it into his hand. This is mine. Not ceremony, not law. A reminder that wherever you go, one heart will call you kin. Luke's fingers trembled as he took it. The feather was light as breath, heavy as destiny. His throat tightened. Thank you. The silence stretched, filled only by the night, wind. He looked north to the Silver Mountains, their ridges like a wall between his old life and the new. But this time there was no emptiness. Tomorrow he would ride into those mountains, not alone but carrying 70 vows. He turned to Nayeli with a rare smile, born not of despair but of hope. The day I found you, I thought it was just a fool's choice. But it opened a path I never dreamed of. Her voice came clear. Not foolish, Luke. Destiny. He swung into the saddle. Moonlight glinted on the carvings, bright as stars. He turned once, casting a final look at the village where he had been remade. "Goodbye, Nayeli," he said warmly. "We will meet again." She nodded, eyes glowing like fire in the dark. Luke tugged the reins. His horse reared and struck forward, hooves echoing like war drums into the night. He did not look back. But in his heart, he carried Nayeli's smile, the feather she had given him, and above all, the 70 vows laid at his feet. From outcast, he had become reborn. A brother. Ahead, the northern mountains waited, silver and endless, and for the first time in years, Luke Callahan no longer felt alone. On the harsh frontier, a cowboy with nothing left had found the rarest treasure: family and honor. Luke Callahan's journey shows us that sometimes a single act of compassion can open a road no man could imagine, binding 2 generations, 2 worlds. If this story touched your heart, leave a simple comment, just a letter or a number, to show you're walking this trail with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more folks can hear stories like this. Thank you for riding with us till the end. See you on the next trail, where courage, humanity, and fate will cross again.